They destroyed my lake house at dawn. No warning, no court order, just bulldozers and that smug HOA director with her clipboard, standing there like she was about to hand out merit badges for arson. I mean, let that sink in. A home built by hand, with grief and hope mixed into every beam, turned to rubble before I even finished my coffee. But what they didn't know, not the clipboard queen or her pet lawyers, was that the pipeline feeding their precious cornfield ran right under my land. And I held the only key to the main inlet valve. So when I shut that valve off, perfectly legal, mind you, their field shriveled, their lawsuits collapsed, and their whole empire of control started to rot from the inside out. I never had to raise my voice. I just stood my ground. Turns out, that's all it takes sometimes. I'll tell you this. I remember the smell of cedar, sawdust, more vividly than I remember my own wedding day. There was something holy about the way the scent of wood and lake air wrapped around me as I worked, like it was blessing every nail I drove. Not a contractor, not a soulless McMansion on a developer's schedule. Just me, my tools, and the silence that comes after you lose everything. Mary Ann, my wife, she passed 3 months before I set the first stone. After 22 years in the Army, 6 deployments for countries, and more missed birthdays than I could stand to count, I came home more broken than the VA could even name. When cancer took her, the last light in my world flickered out. We'd always planned to retire somewhere quiet, by the water. She loved those early mornings, how the mist clung to the lake like silk over a mirror. That's why I bought that acre by Hollow Creek, what was left of our savings and my Army pension. Nothing fancy, just a sloped shoreline behind old sycamores, a quarter-mile off a service road, officially inside the Willow Bend HOA, though at the time I didn't even know what that meant. Those first few weeks building were my baptism, hauling lumber, digging post holes, pounding nails with anger and exhaustion. At first, every swing felt like penance, like I was trying to sweat out grief. But after a while, the rhythm turned into healing. I used old barnwood for beams, river rocks for the fireplace. Mary Ann would have loved the sunroom. 3 walls of windows, golden morning light pouring in. Neighbors started calling it the Lake Chapel. Some laughed, but others brought coffee and stories. They'd ask if I was a builder. I'd just smile and say, no, just a widower with a hammer and a promise to keep. It took me 14 months, and I didn't rush. Every board had meaning. Every window carried her memory. When I finished, I hung the last picture we ever took, her birthday on a lake in Oregon, wind in her hair, right by the front door. Living in that house was like living inside a hell breath. Every morning, black coffee on the dock, loons echoing over the water, the kind of quiet you can't find anywhere else. Some nights, I'd leave the windows open just to let her memory drift through. I even started writing again, just small things, letters to her I never sent. And for a while, Willow Bend's HOA left me alone. I paid my dues, ignored their pool schedules and gardening tips. I figured if I kept to myself, they'd keep to theirs. That all changed the year the drought hit. The lake started shrinking, inch by inch. Fish floundered near shore. Boats sank into mud. Farmers started whispering about failed irrigation. I didn't notice right away, at least not until the letter arrived. Standard envelope, HOA letterhead, so sterile it could have been spit out by a computer. Mr. Callahan, your residence at 114 Shoreline Lane is in violation of Section 8.3 structure must be removed or brought to code within 30 days. I read it 3 times, violation my house. I pulled every permit, checked every line, built it with my hands on private land, deed in my name. I went to the county assessor, asked for my plat map. The woman behind the counter didn't even look up as she slid it over. But the map had changed, a thick blue line buffer zone, now stretching 30 feet further inland, just enough to swallow my home. That house had stood for years without complaint. Now, with the lake shrinking and tempers flaring, they redrew the rules to erase me. I called the HOA. Some kid picked up, polite but robotic. I said I want to talk to whoever changed the buffer zone. That will be Director Karen Dorsett. She's out of the office. Of course she was. I left my number and drove home, back to my dock, where the water line had sunk another foot. Something was shifting in the air. Same feeling you get before an ambush, cold, certain. This wasn't just a nuisance. They weren't just coming for my house. They were coming for everything that made it home. Next morning, I find another envelope jammed in the door. No stamp, just stuck there by hand. The HOA seal pressed on like a threat. Inside, second notice. Second, even though I hadn't even had a full day to answer the first. This one's language is sharp, cold. Failure to respond may result in corrective action, including property adjustment, forced compliance, or removal of non-conforming structures. Property adjustment. Forced compliance. That's what people say when they're about to send a bulldozer through your living room. Military life taught me how to read between the lines of threats. This wasn't a suggestion. This was escalation. I stood outside, listening to sprinklers and lawnmowers, pretending everything was normal, clutching that letter like a live grenade. I drove straight to the HOA office. Glass doors, brick facade, motivational posters about community values. The receptionist smiled that dead-eyed, polite way. Director Dorset is in a board meeting. I said, great, I'll wait. She looked startled, but I just sat on that overpriced leather couch like I belonged there. After almost an hour, the frosted glass door swung open. There she was, Karen Dorset, steel gray bob, nails painted fire engine red, face set like a chiseled warning. She sighed like she'd known this was coming. Mr. Callahan, you should have used proper channels. I held up both violation letters. You sent the second before anyone even called me back. She didn't care. Your home is in violation of a new shoreline conservation expansion. The board acted to protect the community. I said, you can't redraw my boundary without county approval. She said, we have approval. I said, show me. That's internal. That's not how this works, and you know it. Her smile turned predatory. The board is committed to ecological health. You're lying, I said, quiet and certain. She bristled, but when I told her I had every document, original survey, buffer lines, she flinched. You have 30 days, she said, then walked away, heels clicking on marble like a countdown. I went home and walked the boundaries with my survey in hand. Every stake was right where it always had been. The only thing that moved was the lake. The HOA had no right to change my deed, no matter how far the water dropped. But I needed air. I needed space before my anger poisoned every corner of that house. So I loaded a cooler, grabbed my old rowboat, and drifted out on a hollow creek. That's when I noticed it, a metal pump house hidden behind reeds on the far bank, pipe running down to the water, chugging away. Not legal, not on any map. Were they stealing lake water? My water? Was that why they suddenly needed me gone? I rowed back fast, anger burning hotter than the sun. By the time I hit the dock, I knew this wasn't about conservation. They wanted me out so no one would notice their theft. I called Joe Moretti, a buddy from Kandahar, now runs a plumbing company. I told him everything. Meet me by the North Service Road. Bring boots. We snuck through corn taller than our heads, found a squat pump house, big agricultural main, no county tag, no inspection, running hard. Joe shook his head. They're sucking this place dry to keep that field alive. Your house was sitting right on top of the main feed. That's why they needed you gone. For a week, I became a ghost, tracking water levels, photographing the pipe, logging every odd truck that came and went. At night, trail cams caught men in pickups, never county trucks, always moving like they had something to hide. One night, I caught Karen Dorset herself, standing by the pump house, flashlight in hand, making a call. It all clicked. This was their empire, and my house had been the only thing blocking their control of the water. Joe brought over ground-penetrating radar. We mapped the whole thing, illegal pipes, one right under where my bedroom used to be. I realized the only thing they hadn't taken was the inlet valve, and I still had the key. That night, the rain started, a slow, steady wash that turned the rubble to mud. I pulled on my old poncho, found the buried hatch by the water line, and opened it for the first time in years. Down inside, 2 wheel valves, a cracked pressure gauge, and a shiny PVC bypass, fresh as the day it was installed. They thought demolishing my house would bury the evidence. They forgot the valve, and they forgot me. Next day, intimidation started. Mailbox pried open, Threatening phone calls at 3 a.m., cameras slashed. Karen herself came by, sunglasses and windbreaker, holding out a check. A gesture of goodwill, she said. I told her to shove it. She said, walk away, or next time it won't be a letter. I laughed. You sending bulldozers after me personally? She just drove off. I called Elaine, a retired prosecutor. She walked the site, eyes cold and steady. They're screwed, she said. We drafted a cease and desist, attached every photo, map, timestamp. The HOA's reply, 4 frantic pages begging for mediation. But Karen had one last trick, an emergency hearing to seize control of the inlet for the community. So I put on my dress blues and showed up, binder in hand. I laid out the whole scam. Fake maps, illegal pipes, evidence from start to finish. When the chair asked if I had counsel, Elaine stood up. Karen tried to bluster about drought mitigation, but nobody listened. The hearing adjourned for investigation.